Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Hebrew word study today. I pray that you are just being blessed by this weekly study. As you know, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 16, and we are going to the sixth verse. And of course, this is a very momentous time in this episode we've been following here as King Saul is about to be um, deposed and a new king is going to be selected, and we see, we know the story. We know that David is going to be selected king, but what's interesting here is how God is going about this and allowing Samuel to come into the life of David's family, and just the whole difference on how the king is chosen. I hope that you'll see that and notice just the change in just the focus and how God's hand is in this strongly. Not that it wasn't with Saul, but yet you can just look for the differences here on what reasons God gives for have chosen Saul, having chosen Saul previously, and then the reasons he gives for choosing David. And I think those are the key things to point out and to hear as we continue going through this. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and share my screen with you. And you can see that we are in 1 Samuel chapter 16 and the sixth verse, looking at this in Bible Hub. And of course, as you remember last week, there is a kind of a distraction or a new condition set up by which Samuel could go to the city where Jesse is, and how this was arranged on the kind of pretense of offering up a sacrifice. Yes, it did occur, but it was a created device to allow God's will to be done, and we talked about that last week on how God will always provide a way and make a way, and sometimes it's not in the way that we expect. So we see here in verse 6 that the selection process has begun, and so comes Jesse's first son, which is Eliab. Now Jesse has a hand in this, and Jesse obviously kind of has an inkling of what's going on, and so he presents his oldest son first. And what's interesting here is, remember, all of the names in Hebrew, in the Hebrew Bible, have a meaning behind them. They are not given just for the purpose of maintaining a pedigree or identification of the person, but to identify more about the person's nature. And so Eliab is a two-part word. You may recognize the word Eli, and that is a word sometimes used for a metaphor for God. And then Ab, the Aleph and the Beit, is the name for father. So Eliab's name means God is father. And so I think that's a very interesting um, understanding here. And then, so as we read it, it's Vayehi Beroam Vayar et Eliav Vayomer Ach Neged Yahweh Mishicho. And so what's interesting here is, to hear the Hebrew, and the last word that we look at, we kind of recognize the sound, the Mashiach, and we get the word Messiah, Mashika, Mashika, and means Messiah, which is into Greek is translated as Christ. And so here you see this word being used of being anointed, and in the scriptures here, and surely he was going to be anointed in Jesse's eyes. So that's a very interesting word. If we go to the next verse here, in verse 7, but as this is going on, what I see, or what we experience, is that Vayomer Yahweh El Shemuel Al Tabet El. He says, don't look at this guy. Don't look at him for his marehu, his appearance. Vael Gevorah komato ki maasithu ki. And the Lord says, I have refused him. So here is Samuel in this dialogue with the Lord, receiving his play-by-play instructions here, and wondering what that was like. How does he hear the voice of God so strongly and hear these words so strongly that it's like um, a very personal conversation that's going on? And we see that he's being um, refused, and that Samuel is being told not to look on the outward appearance. And then that is where this key verse comes in here that has been something that has been preached and resounding through. It says, Lo asher yireh ha'adam ki ha'adam yireh um, la eneim, la neim Yahweh yireh la levav, that the Lord looks upon the heart. What's interesting here is that the word for man is used as Adam, and that is the word for earth or earthy. So the Lord is making reference not so much to um, his intellect or his spiritual side, but upon the natural man. And so it's saying that God has the ability to look at a natural man for who he is and what he is and where his true values lie. And that's something we don't have. And just the whole metaphors that are being used here of God seeing. God is spirit. He doesn't have eyes the way we have eyes. He's looking not so much at his outward appearance like we do, but he's looking at the heart. Again, he's not. The metaphors here are very interesting, and it opens up a little bit of what men and women of this time frame, what they thought, where they thought the reasoning, the center of reasoning was, where they thought the center of your compassion and your intellect and the core of where your person was not in the mind, but in the heart. And so here it's, he doesn't have X-ray vision. He's not watching like a echocardiogram of the heart pumping, but it says that he's looking at the seat of the emotions. He's looking where his his drive is coming from. Where's his personality coming from? So again, very interesting um, descriptions here. And we move on to verse 8. And the Lord speaks, it says, No, I'm not choosing that guy. And Jesse picks his next son, Abinadab, which means my father is noble. This must have been one that Jesse was pretty proud of, because why would you name your son something that would stroke your own ego, that my father is noble. So obviously this was one of his maybe not first favorite son, because Eliab was, but this one was right up near here, that Abinadab certainly made Jesse feel like a proud father. And he made him pass before, and obviously God is speaking directly and strongly to Samuel and says, nope, he's not the one either. And so we go to verse 9 as the sons are being passed through. And I think we get to the next one is very interesting. This is verse 9, and he made Shammah pass before them. And the word Shammah, again, has the Hebrew meaning of being astonished, but also in a way to be desolated or appalled. So there's something about the nature of Jesse's son Shammah that had some sinister backgrounds to it. Maybe he was very crafty. Maybe he was, um, very good in many ways, physically or economically or socially, but inwardly he was desolate. There was no substance to him. And again, the Lord speaks to Samuel and says, No, I haven't chosen him either. What's interesting is that these three are named, but the other brothers are not named. And of course, this whole story keeps going as Jesse brings the rest of his sons before Samuel for inspection. And this is all going on, and one by one they come through, but these other sons are not named. So when we get to verse 10 here, it says Jesse made his 7 sons pass before Samuel, and get to the end, and they're pretty well done, they think. And but the Lord hasn't chosen any one of these. And so what's interesting here is look at it. He has 7 of his sons, and the Lord doesn't choose any of them. Let's get to the next verse, and because where this comes in is, he says, "Is there another one?" And of course, if you had 7 sons plus David, you would get 8 sons. But yet, when we look in the rest of the scriptures, it always only says that Jesse has 7 sons. And so this is really kind of interesting. And why wasn't um, David given any respect? Because, like in verse 11, this is very disrespectful to David. It says, yeah, there's a young one. He's out there with the sheep, but, it's not even worth talking about him, not even worth mentioning to him. Why did Jesse have such um, a lack of respect for his son David? Well, we don't glean this from the scriptures here, but from the extra biblical Jewish literature. There's a fascinating story that goes about as such that Jesse, again, the story fills it in more. I'll give you just a brief overview that Jesse's wife and him has somewhat of a falling out, to where after their 7 sons were born, they no longer had a marital relationship. But because of this strained relationship, they were going to do something very similar to what Abraham did with, or Sarah did with giving her handmaiden to Abraham, that Jesse's wife was planning to give her handmaiden to Jesse. And but in the middle of the prior of darkness, she did a switcheroo, very similar to the Rachel and Leah type situation. And Jesse's wife switched places with her handmaiden in the darkness, and that allowed Jesse to have a relationship with her and impregnate her. And but Jesse didn't know it. So there must have been some drinking going on here, as the commentators say. And but she switched places, and she became pregnant. Well, Jesse didn't know what happened, and so the accusation was that Jesse's wife played the part of an adulterous woman, and got pregnant, and so David was looked at as an illegitimate son. And so that's why he was not favored, even though in reality he was Jesse's son. But Jesse didn't treat him as such. And so the commentators, play out this story. We look at it and see that it even provides some additional parallelisms between David and Jesus, our Messiah. That his birth was uncertain. His mother was accused of being improper when in reality she wasn't. He was looked upon through his life and scorned as not being a legitimate child as Jesus was. So again, it adds a few more parallelisms that, of course, Jewish scholars don't acknowledge, but we as Christians see that parallelism very, very quickly. So I hope you enjoyed this little study today on Jesse and on his sons and selection, and on David. And next week we'll pick up on the selection of David and see how that all goes. So God bless you. Hope you have a wonderful day and wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.